Hi, welcome to Calcied, and today we're going to be making a calculator project. So we're taking the skills that we've learned with mathematical operators and applying them to make a calculator so that you can cheat with all of your math skills. The first half of this video is designing the calculator, followed by programming the calculator. And if you're a teacher and you're interested in the full scheme of work, worksheets and videos, then check it out in the description for more information. And of course, like and subscribe. The first thing that we want to do is to start a new project. We're going to give our project a meaningful file name, of course. So we'll call this calculator. And then we're going to delete the current sprite that is here and import a calculator background. So I'm going to use a background. You could also choose to design your own background, create a rectangle in black, a white rectangle over the top, and then begin putting on your own buttons. But just for quickness, I'm going to use this background. So I'll delete the old backdrop that's here, and we will just be working with this backdrop. Next, we need to create interactive buttons. So I'm going to replace each of these with a sprite, and I'm going to do that by just making a sprite and layering it over the top of each of these. Down in the sprite section, you've got two options here. You could draw your own, or you could add in a sprite from the library. So since there are already numbers in the library, I'm just going to search for number 1, select this glow and move it over the top of the number 1 button. And then obviously that's a little bit too big, so I'm just going to resize that down. I think about 45 is a good number, maybe a little bigger. I'm going to go with 48, and then I've just placed that over the top, and that's my number 1 button. So basically we're just going to repeat that process. I'm going to choose a new sprite. This time I'll search for number 2, select the number 2 glow, drag it over the top, resize it. Let's try 48. That's maybe a little bit bigger than I might have wanted. Let's see how it looks. The thing is, actually, it's good if it covers a lot of the button because you want it to be able to be clicked. So only where the sprite is will be clicked. So basically just keep continuing this process, choosing a sprite, searching the number that you need and adding them in and resizing. So once you've got the numbers in, I also want to add in a C, which is basically a clear button. So when you want to clear the calculator at the ends, you want to use the letter C. So there's a glow option of this as well, so I'm going to use this C in exactly the same way. So when the user presses C, it's going to clear the memory and reset the calculator ready to be used again. So the next thing we need is to have our mathematical operators. So we've got our numbers to input. We need mathematical operators to do the calculations. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to create my own buttons. So if I want to create a costume, I go to my choose sprite, but this time I'm going to choose to paint the sprite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all start with a circle. I'm going to make the fill for this white. So I'll pull this all the way down here, saturation to the bottom, you'll get white. I'm going to draw our white circle, and that will be our button. And if we drag that over the top, that's our perfect button size. We'll just make it a little bit smaller, move it over, and that's a pretty good size there. So the first one was a divide. So you could use a rectangle and resize it, or you could use a line, and then just choose a color that you like, that you want to make it. So let's make it similar to the color that we've got, and then we'll just increase the line size a little bit, and let's see how that looks. So that's a pretty decent size actually. Now you may feel like that doesn't stand out that well, in which case another option would be to use a rectangle, because then you could choose the fill color that you wanted, and a little bit away. Yeah, that looks good. Now you could select an outline, so put a black outline, and then when you draw your line like this, then you've got the outline appearing, and you just readjust your shape. Move it a little more into the center of this circle, and then make sure you pay attention to where, oops, undo that. Make sure you click select. So next I'm just going to take a hold of this shape, because I want to make sure that we're lining up the center of the shape, this cross here, with this, because that is the center of the sprite. So we want to always line up that center section, because otherwise the center of the sprite would be away from the actual sprite itself. So we're going to pop that back in there. And once we've got that lined up nicely, we can actually see that's moved where the circle is. So I'm just going to readjust that sprite there. But we're basically now going to recreate this sprite. And the best way to do it is just to duplicate the sprite. Then go back to sprite 1, give it a name. So this would be divide. And then we go to our next sprite, which we've just duplicated, drag this over the multiplication section, and then change its name to multiply. And then we're just going to adjust this. So a multiply is basically 2 divide signs almost. So I'm just going to basically copy. So I just did a copy and paste. And I'm just going to move my X over here like this. And then we can duplicate that again. And this time we'll put add or plus, depending on your preference. And so then we're going to readjust these again. So actually, if I select the whole thing and rotate it to here, that is almost a plus sign. And I'm just going to bring this around a bit like this. And that's a plus. And then we move this shape and put it down to here. So now we've got divide, multiply, plus. So let's do one more. Duplicate. Now minus sign, you can just remove this. There we go. That's a minus. And then if we duplicate the add again, actually I've not relabeled this, so just put this as minus. And then down here, my last one, which is my third add, this is going to be an equals. And then the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to choose this one. I'm going to rotate it around and move it up, and then I'm going to move this one down so that we have 2 lines on top of each other. And then we've made ourselves an equals sign. That might be a little bit big, so you could just try to select both of these. That's the whole circle. If you select this, you can press Control or Command, hopefully, to select them both. There we go. And just zoom that down a little bit. Close enough. Okay, so that's all of our buttons complete. The next thing we're going to need to do is to make this calculator perform some operations. The next thing that we need to do is to create our coding. So we're going to need some variables for this. Now, a variable is a store of data, and we can create new variables using this button here. So we're going to make a new variable, and our first variable is going to be called screen display. So it's good practice to not have spaces in between your names or to use an underscore like this to separate, because that's how we would do it in written programming languages. And you may also want to have a lowercase if you wanted to follow convention. So we have our screen display, and we're going to change that screen display to be a large readout. And this is going to be our visual screen display here. So we can view this, and it's not labeled right now. So we'll pop this onto the screen, and then we're going to need 3 more variables. So our first variable I'm going to create will be the operator. So the mathematical operator, that will basically be divide, times, plus, minus. We will also need a memory, and that will store the first number for our calculation. So we're going to input a number that will go to the screen display. Then we will input an operator, and the screen display will move to memory. Then we will enter a new number on the screen display that would be calculated with the first number. And then we need one final which would be the answer, and that's going to store the answer for these. If you decide you need to change the name, you can just right click and rename your variable. So I'm just going to change that to be a lowercase for memories. Now at the start of any program, we need to initialize our variables. I'm going to do this using the C button, because the C button is what we're going to press when we clear. So at the start of the program, so when the green flag is clicked, we want to put each of these variables and set them to have no values. So at the start, this should be blank. And we've got 4 variables, so we're going to bring all 4 of them out. The first one was screen display. The second one was operator, so we're also going to set that to be blank. Then memory will also be blank, and answer will also be blank. And we want to do the same thing when the program is first clicked, but also anytime that we press the C button. So in advance, when this sprite is clicked, we're going to do this same code. If you right click the code, you can duplicate it and put it under here. So now we've got both of these are going to set to clear. The next thing that we need to do is to start giving a screen display. So what we want to happen is when we press a number, that would show up on the screen display. So for example, if we click number 1, so when this sprite was clicked, what I want to happen is for the variable screen display to be set to 1. So if I just run that now and I press this, you see that became a 1. But we can reuse that. Let me drag that onto number 2 so we can reuse it. So I've got this one for number 1, and if I go to number 2 and click this one, number 2, and click that, the display becomes 2. So if I click 1, it's a 1. If I click 2, it's a 2. But the problem is, what if I wanted to have the number 12? That's not going to work. So what we have to do is we want to join together. So we're going to use a concatenation. So that's when you join 2 things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join whatever is the current value of the screen display. So whatever is currently on the screen display, which right now is 2, and I'm going to join it to a 1. So if I press 1 now, see it says 21. So if I press 1, it's just going to keep adding that on as a join. And this also shows that we might want to have our display over here, so that if someone makes a really big number, it can still fit on the screen. So now let's just test our clear button. So the clear button's working as well, and let's reset that. So I'm going to go back to number 2, I'm going to delete this bit of code, and I'm now going to copy this one onto each of the different numbers. So I'm going to put it onto number 2, go to number 2, change it to a 2. Then I'm going to copy it to number 3, change it to a 3, and I'm going to repeat that process. Okay, fantastic. So now all of my sprites, when clicked, should work. And you should go through and test. So I'm going to press the clear button. I'm going to start at 0 and go through and test that each one of these is working correctly. And you can see that every single button is now displaying on the screen. So how do we perform our calculation? We'll start off here with divide. So what's going to happen when the divide is clicked? So first of all, when this sprite is clicked, we want to set the operator value to have this value, this divide value. So we'll go to our variables. So then we're going to set the operator to be divide. And divide in computer science is a /, just like that. And then what we want to do is we need to take this number away from the screen display and put it into the memory, because the memory will store, so we can take another number that will divide. So we're going to set the memory to be whatever the value is of the screen display right now. So set that to screen display. And then the last thing we want to do is to clear the screen display so that it's ready for the next number. So let's look what happens there. When I press this, we should hope to see the operator set to divide, the memory set to this number, and the screen display set to 0. So look at that, beautiful. Let's clear that and practice it as a button. So 1, 2, 3, divide. So the operator is divide, the memory took 1, 2, 3, and the screen display is set to nothing. So we're going to, again, copy this code and pop it into the divide, the multiply. We're going to put it on the addition, and we're going to put it on the subtraction. And then we go through each one, and all we need to do is just change our operator. So this is multiply. In computer science, multiply is a star, okay? So when we go to the addition, we're going to set that to plus. And here on the minus, lovely. And so this one will be minus. So now let's test this out. So 78 plus, there we go. So the operator became plus and the memory is 78. Let's try 96 or just 6. Multiply, good. So we've got a multiply and the memory became 6. And then let's have 12 minus, operator is minus, memory is 12. It's really important to just do your checking as you go along. So this is called testing, and it's a really important part of any bit of programming. So now that we've completed that, what do we need to do next? We've chosen our first number, so I've chosen 12. I've decided I'm going to multiply. Now I need a number to multiply it by, so I'm going to multiply it by 3. Now you can see that's set the screen display, because when I click 3, it sets screen display to be 3. So we've got 12 times by 3. The next thing would be our equals button, which at the moment is not doing anything. So now we need to do our final calculation in the equals, and then we're going to write that to the variable answer. So we're going to click on our equals sign here. And again, we're going to start with when this sprite is clicked, and we're going to use conditional statements. So a conditional statement can have 2 possible answers, true or false. And we find those in control. And if something happens, one result will happen, otherwise or else another decision will happen. So what's our first condition? Well, I want to know if I'm using divide, multiply, plus, or minus. So I'm going to look in here, and we're going to use a comparison operator. So we want to know if the operator variable is showing either a plus, minus, take away. So we're going to test to see if the operator is equal to, and I'm going to start with plus. So if the operator is equal to plus, then it's going to do some adding. So if that is true, then I'm going to set the answer to be whatever is in memory plus whatever the screen display is. So we're going to need to use mathematical operators addition. So if the operator is equal to plus, then my answer will be whatever is stored in the memory plus, oops, so that just didn't pull inside properly, so just make sure he jumps in like that, plus whatever is on the screen display. So screen display. And then we can test that. So if we do a clear, and then we'll do 3 plus 2 equals, and the answer is 5. So 3 plus 2 does equal 5. So this is working, and we've stored our answer. So we're going to continue on now. So now we need to test for a minus. Now we're going to go back to here, and I'm going to use another if-then statement. And because an if statement only has two possible answers. So if it's true, it does this. If it's false, otherwise or else, it goes here. But that's only one possible option, and we have three more signs. So what I'm going to do is put an if statement inside of this else, and this is called nested if. So I'm going to do the same thing again. So if this one wasn't true, we're going to do this test instead. So if the operator is equal to, so if the operator value is equal to a minus sign, and if that's true, then we're going to do this same bit of code again. So I'm going to duplicate this and put it in here. We're going to set the answer, but we're not going to do a plus this time. We're going to do a minus. Oops. In this one. So memory minus screen display. Okay, and I'll throw this one away. So now if that isn't true, in fact we better test it quickly. So clear, and then so 23 minus 2 should give us 21. And look at that, 21. So let's continue on with the next one. Okay, so then another if-else statement. So this time we're checking for multiply. So if the operator is going to be equal to multiply. So if it's equal to multiply, then I'm going to set the answer to multiply. And it will multiply the memory times the screen display. There we go. So now I've got plus, I've got minus, and I've got multiply. So if it isn't minus or plus, if it's not plus, it's not minus, and it's not multiply, well, it can only possibly be divide. And this is one of the reasons that we use a nested if, because I only need to do 3 tests, because if it's not any of these, then it must be a divide. So in this last one, all I need to do is set the answer to be memory, oops, we need the divide sign, of course. So divide memory divided by the screen display. Perfect. So now let's test all of those. So I've cleared. So we're going to do 1 plus 2 equals 3. Perfect. 3 minus 1 equals 2. Perfect. Clear. 5 times 9 equals 45. Clear that. 9 divided by 3 equals 3. It's perfect. So now what we want is for this answer to be on screen. So if I do 23 plus 8, at the moment the answer is showing here, but the screen display still says 8. So the very last thing we want to do once we've finished performing all of this calculation, at the very end, we're going to set the screen display to be whatever the answer is. So I'm going to set my screen display to answer. So now if we run this again, so we're going to clear this. Can we see all of that? Let me hide my backpack. There we go. So 2 times 4 equals, and now the screen display is showing 8. And that is our working calculator. To make it a little bit tidier now, you can remove the variables so they're not showing, and all we see is our screen display, and you can now calculate anything you want. I want 368 times by 258. What does that equals? 94,944. Try and do some even bigger numbers if you want to, But that is our completed calculator, and I hope you enjoyed our lesson today. In Calciad, we have used mathematical operators, we have used nested if statements, conditional statements. We've made some really impressive moves today, so well done, keep on learning and enjoy your calculator fun.